Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the thoughtful insights that have been shared by my colleagues on both sides of the aisle today, and I think it's important that we have these conversations. A lot of our conversations have focused on election year vacancies, and I want to reiterate a point that I think needs to be mentioned. Many of us, myself certainly included, did not use as our explanation in 2016 the notion that it is categorically unacceptable to confirm a nominee to the Supreme Court to fill a vacancy that has arisen during a presidential election year. It was not our argument, at least it was not my argument. This is rather a simple expression of the history of the United States when it comes to these issues. Now, this arises not infrequently. It comes up from time to time. There are 29 instances in the history of our republic in which a Supreme Court vacancy has arisen during a presidential election year. And of those 29 times, on 29 times, a president has named a nominee. So 29 vacancies, 29 nominations. Of those 29 nominations, 10 of those times arose when the White House and the Senate were controlled by different parties. 90% of the time, in 9 of those 10 instances, the nominee was rejected, was not confirmed by the United States Senate. And on the other 19 occasions of the 29 vacancies arising during a presidential election year, the Senate and the White House were under the control of the same party. Some refer to that as united government, or at least united government between the White House and the Senate. Of those 19 occasions in which a nomination was made to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court arising during a presidential election year during a period of so-called united government, 18 of those 19 nominations were confirmed by the United States Senate. Abe Fortas was the exception there. Abe Fortas was rejected on a bipartisan vote, as Abe Fortas was at the time involved in an ethics scandal. Oh, this is significant. We are one of the political branches of government. We do have a system in which we've got 2 parties, and we do have a system in which Supreme Court nominees have to go through 2 branches of government, through the White House and confirmed by the Senate. It's not entirely surprising that this history has evolved the way it is, to the point that 90% of the time, if there's divided government, the nominee is not going to be confirmed by the Senate. And more than 90% of the time, if there is united government, the nominee will be not only nominated, but confirmed by the United States Senate. As to the point that we've had comments about what happens after the election, and I should point out that those comments need not, and in fact ought not, be viewed in isolation. We have to remember what Hillary Clinton said in August, I believe in an interview conducted by the show called The Circus. She said, quote, "Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances because I think this is going to be a drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if he doesn't give an inch and if we're as focused and relentless as the other side is." So one has to view it in that context. One has to view the fact that we've had urging from both sides of the political aisle on what should happen. We have had urging, particularly from the left, for Vice President Biden not to concede, quote, under any circumstances. That's really important to note. As to the Merrick Garland point, when you consider it in the context of the historical backdrop I just mentioned, where in the overwhelming majority of the cases, the nominee filling a vacancy arising during an election year is confirmed in the case of united government, is not confirmed in the case of divided government. That is relevant to what happened in 2016. Republicans had, in the election of 2014, secured the majority in the United States Senate. Elections do, in fact, have consequences. We are, in fact, a political branch of government. And we chose not to confirm Merrick Garland. We were widely criticized by the mainstream media and by our Democratic colleagues at the time for not holding hearings in that circumstance. We were told repeatedly that we were shirking our constitutional duty for not holding hearings at the time. We have to remember that the word hearing is, of course, used nowhere in the Constitution. To my knowledge, it's not a constitutional or a statutory imperative. It is nonetheless something that we do in order to be thorough in the way that we do our jobs. The point there is that we knew we were not going to confirm Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland didn't have the votes in order to be confirmed. Knowing that that was the case, we chose, rather than to waste your time and ours, rather than put Merrick Garland through the difficult process of going through a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing as if he were going to be confirmed when we knew he was not, we chose to announce that we would not be confirming him. Now, that was a decision that was made. You can disagree with that if you want. It's not out of the historical norm for us not to confirm a nominee. And declining to hold a vote where we know the outcome of the vote at the outset is also not outside the norm. We routinely decline to vote, and in some cases decline to hold hearings on legislation when we know that the legislation at issue has no chance of passing. It is, moreover, relevant to note here that in all the years that I've been watching hearings regarding Supreme Court nominees, I can't think of a single instance in which a Democratic nominee has gone through the type of personal, vindictive attack that we've seen against a number of our Republican nominees. And I don't mean just one or two. I'm talking about nominees including Justice Kavanaugh, including Justice Alito, including Judge Bork, and including, to a very significant, and I would say obscene degree, Justice Thomas. So it's ironic that we would be accused by the other party for being unkind to Merrick Garland. And you can't point to a single instance in which we've treated a Democratic nominee the way that you have treated Republican nominees. Not a single instance. Not even one. Let's remember what happened with Justice Kavanaugh. We received the nomination in July 10th, as I recall. A couple of months later, we held hearings on Judge Kavanaugh. Those hearings stretched into the better part of a week. Those hearings included public segments and private segments. In the private meeting, we're always given a chance to review any personal information that might not be appropriate to be viewed in public in the first instance. At no point during either the public segments of that hearing or the private hearing did anyone breathe a word of allegations that would only later be brought forward, having been leaked to the press, having been known, as we later concluded, by multiple members and staff members on the Democratic side of the aisle within this committee. That information was held out until after those hearings had concluded. That wasn't fair. It's not something that we do to Democratic nominees. It's not something we've ever done to a Democratic nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States, not in this committee, not as I've ever seen it, not as I can imagine it. I heard reference earlier today from one of our colleagues who recalled with a sense of wistfulness the fact that Justice Ginsburg was confirmed by a bipartisan supermajority. And yes, she was. I can't think of any of our Republican nominees in recent memory who have received that, who have enjoyed that. Now, I don't fault that. I think each and every member has to decide for him or herself whether a particular nominee is acceptable to the extent necessary to obtain their vote. But we do have to remember that this door swings both ways, and when you bemoan the partisan nature of this exercise, I don't think any of us likes the partisan aspect of it, but that doesn't arise in a vacuum. And neither did President Trump's statements that have come to light in this discussion arise in a vacuum. And it doesn't arise in a vacuum that the overwhelming majority of the time, whether or not a nominee appointed to a vacancy arising during a presidential election year, during a time of united government, that nominee is in all probability going to be confirmed and is going to not be confirmed in the absence of united government. So, look, we've gone through tough things as a committee before. We'll go through tough things as a committee in the future. But let's not pretend here that any of these things has arisen in a vacuum, because they haven't. Thank you.